What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel, and in this video I'm going to give you my top 10 most underrated teams heading into the 2024 college football season. So how this video is going to work, we're pretty much going to give you some teams here that I think are being underrated going into the 2024 season. These are teams, you're going to see these 10 teams on this list that feel like, are getting slept on. They're not going to be really good this year. They don't really have high expectations. But you'll see some of these teams on this list that, were really good last year, and they do have high expectations this year. But they are still definitely going to be a really good team. You're not going to see any of those top teams on here, though, like Utah, Georgia. You're not going to see, Oklahoma State, some teams that won their conference championships last year. So you're not going to see any of those teams on here. These are pretty much teams that are getting slept on going into 2024, and I think they're definitely being underrated heading into 2024. So let's go ahead and get right into this list. We'll start from the bottom and work our way to the top. These are my top 10 most underrated teams heading into the 2024 season. And we start here with number 10, and that's Indiana. Indiana comes in here at number 10. They were 3-9 last year in 2023. They obviously do have a new head coach this year, so it's a new rebuild and it's a new era here for this Indiana football program. But you look at what they've done in the transfer portal. That's the reason why Indiana is so underrated heading into 2024. Yes, they have a new head coach and everything. We don't know how good they're going to be, but you look at what they've added in the transfer portal. This team has a bunch of guys that play that, some really good programs. Some of them coming over from, the same program as they were in James Madison. We'll see if this Indiana team can turn things around. They do have a schedule that's not really that horrible. That's also the reason why they're on this list. They're not really high on this list just because based off of where they were last year. But again, you just look at this roster. They don't have a lot of experience, but they added a lot of experience from the transfer portal. So that's how Indiana ended up being here on this list. And I think they are being underrated just a little bit heading into 2024. Not saying they're going to make it to a bowl game, but they do have a chance to do that with the schedule that they have. Yes, they do have Michigan and Ohio State both on the schedule, but they got that Michigan game at home, so maybe that's a really good opportunity for them to compete in that game. So Indiana here at number 10, I think they are underrated heading into 2024. Moving on to number 9, we stay in the Big Ten, and it's Rutgers. Rutgers coming off a very big surprising season last year at 7-6. People do expect this team to drop off, based off of where they were last year, but I do expect them to have a really good season again. I think they do make it to a bowl game probably this year based on their schedule. Their schedule is not that horrible. That's the reason why they're also on this list. Rutgers, you look at the offensive side of the football, yes, they do lose some players there, some good talented players, but you look at the defense, almost everybody returns there on the defensive side of the football, and it seems like this program is now heading in the right direction. So I think Rutgers actually has a chance to be a pretty good team this year. I think they're being underrated just a little bit. Not saying they're going to be a top 25 team, but if they really continue to, win these games and, start to turn this program around, they can definitely be a top 25 team in the future. I think they're going to be pretty good this year. Not saying, like I said, they're going to make it to, the Big Ten championship or anything like that. But they do have a chance to make it to a bowl game. That's really all they can do. But they won 7 games last year. That's a big accomplishment there in 2023. And I think they're definitely underrated heading into 2024. So they're number 9 here on this list. Moving on to number 8, and that's Missouri. Missouri comes in here at number 8 from the SEC. They were 11-2 last year. I don't think anybody saw this coming. I think Missouri was definitely, overrated last year, in my opinion. But last year they were definitely underrated due to their record. And also, they were definitely underrated with the team that they played. Like I said, the team that they had. You look at the roster this year, they are definitely going to be really good on both sides of the football. I think offensively, they'll be pretty good. You got Brady Cook coming back at quarterback, and you also got your top wide receiver returning from last year. You do lose your top running back from last season, but still, it's not really just about the record. It's not really the fact that I think Missouri is a top 10 team. It's just because of the schedule. Their schedule is one of the the easiest in the SEC. That's the reason why you're seeing Missouri here on this list. They definitely could probably win the SEC this year and probably go to, the college football playoff. Not saying they're going to. They don't have to play Georgia, though. They don't have to play Ole Miss. They don't have to play LSU. They don't have to play Tennessee. I mean, that's a really easy schedule. The only toughest game on there I could really probably see them have is probably Alabama. They do play that game on the road, but I think Missouri definitely has a chance to win that game. And you look at what Missouri did last year. They were the only team out of the SEC East from last year to really challenge Georgia. So I can see why Missouri is on this list. They're definitely being underrated in my opinion. I think this is definitely a top 15, top 10 team perhaps, maybe not a top 5, but if they have a really good season, they're definitely a top 5 team in my opinion. So they are number 8 here on this list. Again, a very big surprise team from last year. Moving on to number 7, another surprise team, and that was Louisville. Louisville comes in here at number 7. They were 10-4 last year in Jeff Brom's first season. And you look at what they've done in the transfer portal. This Louisville team is going to be really good. Yes, they do lose a lot of players on the offensive side of the football, but they brought in, some transfers to help them out. Defensively, they bring back almost everybody back from there. This Louisville team has a really good chance to win the ACC this year. I think they're definitely underrated in my opinion. I think a lot of people, didn't expect them to win 10 games last year. I don't know if I underrated Louisville just, a little bit last year, but you look at this team this year, I think they're definitely underrated. I think they're definitely like a top 15, maybe a top 10 team if they really do have a really good season. But I like what Jeff Brom has done in his first year at Louisville. Heading into his second season, he added a ton of guys in the transfer portal, and also he has a quarterback coming over from the transfer portal from Texas Tech with a lot of experience. So yeah, this Louisville team I think has a chance to be pretty good. They're definitely underrated in my opinion. Again, they were 10-4 last year in 2023. We'll see what they can do in 2024 as they're number 7 here on this list. Moving on to number 6, and that's Wisconsin. Wisconsin coming off a really up-and-down season last year. They were definitely overrated in my opinion last year, but this year I'm definitely underrating them. You look at the roster that they have coming back. They have a really good amount of production coming back on both sides of the football. They also added some pieces in the transfer portal, so I think Wisconsin will be a really good team this year. Again, they were definitely overrated last year. I think a lot of people just didn't really expect them to go 7-6. Yes, they did have a talented roster, but I just really wasn't buying it. Luke Fickell, of course, coming in, from last year, I just really wasn't buying it just yet. I think it had to take some time before they can really get used to him. But this year, I think they'll get used to him. I think they'll definitely have a really better season. So, again, I think Wisconsin is definitely being underrated for 2024. This team does have a chance to be a top 10, maybe a top 15 type team this year. So we'll see if they can turn things around and probably win maybe at least 10 games. And they can also probably make the college football playoff and maybe the Big Ten championship. So watch out here for the Badgers in 2024. Moving on to the top 5 now. At number 5, they got Miami. They were 7-6 last year. I think Miami is definitely underrated heading into 2024. I think I overrated Miami just a little bit last year. I really couldn't remember, but I think the Hurricanes are definitely underrated. You look at a talent on this roster that on both sides of the football. They do return a good amount of production on the offensive side of the football. Defensively, they do return a good amount of players there. They also brought in some pieces in the transfer portal. And Mario Cristobal knows how to get it done. We've seen him really choke in games, though. I mean, that could probably happen again this year, but you look at what Miami has done in the transfer portal, that's the reason why they're on this list. The recruiting class is really good, a top 3 recruiting class in the country. And then also, like I said, the transfer portal has been huge for them. Cam Ward, of course, coming over at quarterback from Washington State. Probably could be one of the best quarterbacks maybe in the country coming up this year, and also maybe in all the ACC. So Miami, I think, is underrated. I think this is definitely a top 15 team, but maybe they could have another season that's really up and down. I mean, Mario Cristobal probably could be on the hot seat for next year if they have another type of season like they did in the last couple years, but I think Miami does have a chance to be pretty good. They definitely have a chance to be a dark horse and also a top contender in the ACC. So you're seeing here at number 5 here on this list is the Miami Hurricanes. Moving on to number 4, it's Minnesota. Minnesota, of course, going 5-7 was a disappointment last year. Minnesota is definitely underrated. I do expect this team to turn things around. This is one of the most consistent programs in the Big Ten. They definitely should be able to turn things around this year. They got a lot of production production coming back. A lot of guys coming over, maybe from the transfer portal, but just overall, this is a very experienced Minnesota team. I think a lot of people are kind of, sleeping on Minnesota just a little bit, thinking they're probably going to have another drop-off season, but again, they have a lot of production coming back. This definitely could be a top 25 team. I think they'll definitely make it to a bowl game this year. They could probably be somewhere around 6, 7, 8-4, perhaps 7-5 or 6-6. But I do expect them to be up there like around 6, 7, or 8 wins, perhaps. Again, this is a very consistent Minnesota football program, so they are here at number 4. Again, just going 5-7 last year. They're definitely underrated heading into 2024. Moving on to number 3, and that's Nebraska. So we stay in the Big Ten here. Nebraska, of course, going 5-7 in Matt Rule's first year. We see, some competitiveness from Nebraska last year. We'll see if they can do that again this season. But again, Nebraska, they lost a lot of those close games last year. I think Nebraska was definitely maybe not overrated. I think they were definitely underrated. Again, they play in a lot of close games. If they can just win those close games, Nebraska would definitely be right there as a Big Ten dark horse contender and maybe also a top 25 team. But you look at the roster this year, they have almost everybody coming back, added some pieces in the transfer portal, I believe. So I think Nebraska actually could finally make a bowl game and probably get over the hump. It's been up and down years for Nebraska. We'll see if Matt Rule can finally turn this program around. But one thing that the Cornhuskers need to do more importantly is win those close games. That's going to be the most important part coming into 2024 is winning those close games. And again, that's the reason why they went 5-7. They lost a lot of close games last year in 2023. We'll see if they can win those close games this year. But Nebraska here at number 3, underrated heading into 2024. Moving on to number 2, it's Iowa State out of the Big 12. I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on the Cyclones. You look at their record from last year. Yes, they were 7-6, but look at the amount of production they have coming back this year. They have a ton of experience coming back on both sides of the football. Offensively, they do bring back almost everybody there on the offensive side of the football. And then defensively, they also have a lot of experience coming back. So I think Iowa State is definitely a dark horse contender in the Big 12. I think they're somewhere right around, close to that top contender spot, but not quite there just yet. But in my opinion, this is a top 25 team this year. I know the Big 12 can be very competitive this season, but again, this is an Iowa State team that I just think a lot of people are sleeping on. This is a team, like I said, with a lot of experience coming back. And in fact, they have the most, or actually not the most experience coming back in the country. They're just, in second right behind the other team that we're going to talk about in just a second. But again, this Iowa State team, I think a lot of people are going to be really, or actually not like, really, low on them. I think they're probably getting slept on in 2024. So that's why you're seeing them so high on this list. With the experience that they have coming back on both sides of the football, that's the reason why Iowa State ended up being here at number 2. So but that's not the most underrated team heading into 2024. That brings me to my number 1 team here. The number 1 most underrated team heading into the 2024 season is going to be the Virginia Tech Hokies. Virginia Tech is the most underrated team heading into 2024. Look at the roster. I mean, they do have a lot of production coming back on both sides of the football. They have the most production coming back in the country and also the ACC. And they also have a schedule that really sets it nicely for them to have a really good season. Again, this Virginia Tech team, they almost bring back everybody on the offensive side of the football. They bring back 95% of their offense from last year. And then defensively, they bring back almost everybody back there as well. So like I said with Iowa State, they were the second, team behind Virginia Tech in the most production coming back in the country. Virginia Tech is actually number 1. And that's how Virginia Tech ended up being the number 1 most underrated team heading into 2024. This team does have a chance to probably be a top 25 team. Not a top 10 team or top 15. They had to really, win some games in order for me to put them in the top 15 and also top 10. They're not a preseason top 25 team perhaps, but I think Virginia Tech is definitely a team that you don't want to sleep on for 2024. Again, this team with the most production coming back in the country, and again, the most production coming back in the ACC. And again, this Virginia Tech team is a team that everybody is really sleeping on. I think Virginia Tech has a chance to be a really good team this year. So watch out here for the Hokies. Again, they're number one here on this list. Yes, they're coming off a 7-6 season last year, but this is a team that has a chance to win 10 games this year with the experience that they have coming back on the roster. So Virginia Tech here at number one. And those are my top 10 most underrated teams heading into the 2024 college football season. Tomorrow we're going to do the top 10 most overrated teams for 2024, so stay tuned for that video. But thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports channel.